Excellent. Okay, welcome everybody. Very happy to have you guys here. This is the second live training that we've done. We will keep doing these at least a couple times a month for people to get up to speed with SkyGlass. Want to confirm real quickly, or just tell you what the format for today is going to be, and then I'll ask you some questions, then we'll get into the detail. So we've got a lot to cover. I'll go through the agenda in a second, but basically I'm going to be demoing SkyGlass. We'll walk through all the features. I'll pause periodically throughout to answer any questions. If you have a question and I'm still rambling, use the reaction and just, raise your hand so I can see the set, pop up on the little gallery, and then I'll, find a place to pause, and and then what will happen then is you can unmute yourself, or I'll ask you to unmute, and then you can ask your question, and then I'll answer the question. If not, please keep everything muted so that we don't have any background noise for everybody else. All righty, and assuming I did a mic check, so that's good. Assuming everybody has already created a username, they've gotten into SkyGlass, all that kind of stuff. Nod a head or raised hand. Okay, good. So everybody's in. We don't have any brand new users. Okay, good, because I didn't want to cover that today. All right, super. And again, you don't have to show your video. It's helpful for me just so I can get a quick, cross-check and see, how people are doing. But again, if you need to ask a question, just use the reaction to raise your hand. All right.
Excuse me, I am a new user. I am a new user. I'm sorry.
And who's that?
Chris.
Hey, Chris Douglas. Okay, excellent. So
Chris, I'm sorry.
Chris on Douglas. Sorry about that. All right. Okay. So what I will do is I'll just take a little bit more time, and you can listen intently at the very first part of this, and then we can hopefully you'll be able to onboard fast. Okay.
Great. Fine.
All right. So let me share my screen. And first thing I want to do is in the last session, someone had said, I can't see your mouse. So I wanted to increase the mouse size. So this is absurdly large, but doable for me. Is that too big, or can everybody see that mouse moving around? Cool. All right. Is that still okay? Or do I need to keep it big? It's okay. All right. Excellent. I'm going to keep it at not so absurdly large. Okay, great. So let's talk about the topics for today. We'll do the onboarding basics, how to get into SkyGlass. We'll talk about the user interface in great detail. I'll cover most of the buttons and the entire screen space. We will talk about loading traffic in military mode and standard mode. We will cover how to change your home locations. Last time I forgot to talk about the favorite locations panel. So if I skip that again, somebody get my attention, and I'll make sure we cover that. So we'll talk about favorite locations. We will cover traces in short form, as well as the type list panel. The watch list panel, we will just do basics. We've got a deep dive on that coming up in a couple of days. And so if you're interested in that, we're going to go super deep into the watch list because there's a ton to cover there. Probably take the full hour and a half, if not 2 hours. I will touch briefly on what to do if, how to restore your SkyGlass if something goes wrong, or get you back to the default states. Of course, we'll have lots of time for Q&A. We will not be covering any of the advanced functions. Time travel mode, not talked about. We're not going to do flight history reporting. We're not going to do the database. I do have the deep dive for the database in a few weeks, so be sure to check out the live schedule and register for that. And we will also not be covering the preference panel. Okay. Any questions before I get started? Anything that's not here that you really want covered, and I'll make a note. No, nobody knows yet. Okay, no problem. Good. All right. While I'm here, Ren is seeing him on screen is reminding me you can, for help, you can always go to the website and fill out the support form, or best yet, use the need help button, which is a direct chat, goes right to my phone and my watch. And then you can reach me directly. for technical support or answer any questions, and especially anything for your subscription status and username, things like that. There's also a very active Discord community, which Ren is a part of, and he's fabulous. He's one of my star aces. I'm going to make you blush. He's fantastic. Anyway, so that community, if you've got other deeper questions or just want to share stuff, it's very active and very supportive to get answers over there. So thank you for that, Ren. And all right, moving on. Okay, so onboarding basics. First thing I'm going to do is, well, let's talk about it. So you go to the website, you download the installer if you're on Windows, and you run the installer. If you're on Mac, it's just a simple download of the app itself. And then when you launch, let me log out, so we'll get to the login screen. When you launch, you're presented with the, you've got two options. You can log in or create. So, Chris, so what you'll want to do, Chris, to actually, create a username within SkyGlass, you want to pick any new username that you want, enter any password that you want. Be sure that you use the email that you used on the website when you purchase your subscription. And that way, when those emails are the same, it will automatically update perfectly. Fill in all those three and then just click on the create button. And when you do that, that's going to initiate an email with an activation link. And then find that email, click on the link to activate it, come back to SkyGlass and use those credentials to log in. If there,
I think I did all of that.
Okay, did you find your activation link?
Yes, and I think you told, we were chatting for a bit, and I think you told me that I was linked up, and I have a username and password.
Okay, great.
And I opened the app on my Mac, and I'm seeing the screen, but I don't see this login screen that you have there.
Okay, and you're on a Mac.
Yep.
Okay, so you double clicked on the downloaded app itself, SkyGlass app.
Yeah, it's in my app file.
Okay.
And
what do you see exactly?
I see what you've got there without all the planes on it. I can kind of move, well, it moves around a bit. I can move it around, make it bigger and smaller, but I don't know how to log in from this where I am now.
Okay, so one of the options at the login screen is to activate the auto login. And then when the next time you launch SkyGlass, it will bypass the username and login area, and you'll just go right in. So let me do that now.
I think that's what I did.
Okay, so you're good to go.
I just don't know how to. Okay.
Okay, no problem.
I'm good.
Great. All right, so let me log in now. All right, so I wanted to cover something quickly. If something goes wrong and SkyGlass is not able to, oh boy, come on, get that mouse. There we go. And SkyGlass is not able to see the login server, you're going to see something like this. And the keys are this sort of lower section. If it says version check underneath SkyGlass, and it says trying to connect or something like that, then you know that the server has not been reached and you've got a larger sort of network issue. And that can either be your VPN is on, so make sure your VPN is off when you try and go when you're logging in. Once you're logged in, you can activate the VPN back if you so choose. It's going to slow things down, but you'll have that benefit of the VPN if you want it. But the login server connection and the login process cannot traverse the VPN in most cases. The other possibility is that you have an antivirus or firewall that you'll need to grant SkyGlass access to get through. And then you'll see a version check or version number underneath that and the status window on what your login process is. Okay. All that clear? All right, we got nodded heads. Perfect. Okay, so when you enter SkyGlass or you've logged in, let me click on the button. All right, so let me take let me do the restore first. If you get your SkyGlass in a wonky position that you can't seem to bring it back to normal, let me show you the process. But SkyGlass will run. If you open, let me scale up my UI real quick. If you open up the preferences, which is the gear icon in the main stack, and you look on the left-hand side, save preference options, there's this big button, full reset, big flame icon. Click on that. And what that's going to do is it's essentially going to go out, find the preferences file on your computer, delete it, and then force SkyGlass to recreate one from scratch. It'll essentially bring back the defaults, which is exactly how you are when you first log into SkyGlass, which is what I've done here. All right. So, user interface basics. All right, first thing you'll want to do is probably scale the user interface. So that's the first button I'm going to talk about. On the main button stack, which is the bottom right-hand corner, this first vertical grouping of buttons, you've got a little chevron up and down. Click on that and drag, and you'll see that the entire user interface, all four corners of that, will scale up. So for our purposes, I'm going to scale it up pretty large. Is that viewable for everybody to see? Is that a good scale? Yeah. Okay, excellent.
Hold on a second, Goa.
Yes, sir.
All of my screens for you guys are all covering that. I'm not familiar with Zoom. How can I move these screens out of the way of your menu bar?
Okay, so that is a gallery function. Let me see if I remember how to do that.
If I can drag it over to the left side of the screen, that would work. But right now it's covering everything you're talking about.
Well, you should be able to adjust the number of things that you're seeing, meaning this, if it's multiple screens, you can move that down to one or minimize it. Yeah. So it's the gallery function. You can change what's being shown in the gallery, multiple users, just me, or even minimize it so it's just the name.
All right, I'm looking for that. Okay, I found something there. That's better. Okay.
Okay, good. All right. All right, so scaling the user interface. So just so you know, I use this a lot when I'm using SkyGlass. I generally will, first make this so that, the buttons are easy and accessible. But depending on what I'm trying to do, if the screen is too big or, I've got a lot to show in my watch list, something like that, I use this scale function often. It should remember, SkyGlass should remember the last scale that you took. And so when you come back into SkyGlass, should be pretty much just as you left it. Okay, but that's the easy way to scale the user interface. And you want to do that because every screen is different. Okay, I'm going to start on the bottom right-hand corner and talk about the sort of organization of the user interface. As I said, this far right-hand corner, first vertical column is the main button stack. The user interface will build out to the left of that, depending on your settings. So if we'll start at the very bottom button will collapse the user interface and bring it down to its minimum, which is just the main button stack. Very useful. It will also close the watch list and the type list panel if you have those open. I utilize that mostly for when I want to really navigate around, look at stuff on screen, or if I'm taking a screenshot, I'll clean up the, want to share it on social, I'll clean up the interface, take a screenshot, and then bring this back. There are several things that are enabled by default. First off, you're going to be dropped into military mode versus standard mode, and we'll talk about the differences in a little bit later. Let me turn back on auto refresh. The auto refresh should also be on, and you'll have a couple of panels that will be extended. The auxiliary button stack, which is this first big grouping, that's always on. Then you'll have the auto refresh pop-up and the aircraft panel pop-up. All right. Depending on, like I said before, depending on what settings that you have enabled, more and more of these little pop-ups will populate out to the left. Okay. For example, if I turn on the traces, now you can see we've got another pop-up here. If I turn off auto refresh, that goes away, etc. Okay. And then this next one, this is a group of sliders. This is one of the first sort of core awesome features of SkyGlass. This first slider is the height adjustment slider, or sometimes called the relative height slider. All right. And so, you know, the default is sort of this far zoomed out view of the map, and you've got this sort of side angle. If I take this height adjustment slider and bring it all the way down, that actually represents the actual height of the aircraft position. Okay. So as I was developing this, and I was sort of, you know, building this out, I thought, well, when you're zoomed out, you know, to have them at actual altitude might as well have a flat map, right? It's not very useful. So take that relative height slider and scale it up, and it basically just stretches relatively all of the heights of all the aircraft, so you can kick off to the side and see, you know, who's up and who's low, all the different flight levels. This next one is the scaling of the aircraft elements themselves. Okay, so, and you'll need to adjust this every time you change the zoom level on your map. All right, which is this bottom section of the auxiliary button stack. All right, so let me do that now. Let me pick a location over in Texas. I'm going to grab the slider on the map zoom and bring it into about halfway, a little less than half. And the map tiles will take a second to load, and then you'll see this new map zoom level. And then what you can do is, depending on that zoom and what's appropriate, bring the height adjustment slider down to what seems, you know, useful, and then you can scale the aircraft back up based on the zoom level. Make sense? Excellent. Okay, so let me bring this back to a wide view map. All right. You'll notice that I'm using the slider when I'm changing the map zoom. It's not particularly useful. Well, you can use the up and down buttons. I like to jump. I don't like to grab and slide as much because the map tiles actually take more time to load. So typically I'll pick, you know, get familiar, and then I'll just pick a zoom level and click on it. It'll automatically move the map and the zoom and start reloading all the tiles, just a little bit more efficient. Okay, before I get too much further into the user interface, let me talk about how you move the map around and move the camera around. All right. As you probably figured out, left button drag will translate the map, and right button starts the rotation. Okay, there are sort of two more things you can do. Most of you figured out if you use the mouse scroll wheel, and if you're on a trackpad, the pinch, I think, or the scroll should work. That's going to move your camera position in and out of this sort of central rotation. It's not actually moving the zoom level, right? There's a difference between the map zoom and the scroll zoom of the camera. All right. And then the other thing you can do is raise the camera up and down. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when I talk about the jumper. But you can use the option key and then translate. So left button drag up and down. You can move your camera up and down. All right. I will want to call your attention to something important, though. So you'll notice here, let me get this to something that's a little bit easier to see, lighter. Okay, you'll notice if I'm fully zoomed in, you're going to have this little purple target in the center of the screen. That represents the center of rotation of the camera. And it's always going to be center screen, middle of the screen throughout your use of SkyGlass. But as you zoom out, it'll get smaller, etc. All right. If I scale the elements up, that's the only way that thing is going to get bigger, but it scales with everything else. Okay. But that is useful to sort of know, because if you get off the top of the map's face and you're kind of floating in space, you'll notice that's where your center of rotation is always around that center target. Okay. So it's a visual representation of where your center of rotation and translation is. Make sense? If you're not familiar with sort of camera movements, and I come from an animation background, so camera setups and stuff is sort of is inherent in me, but this always gives you a visual representation of where your center of rotation is. Okay. If you zoom in, you'll notice I can still translate around, but my center of rotation is very different than if I'm zoomed out. That make sense? Okay. And again, if your jumper's on, we'll talk about this a little bit more later. If your jumper's on and you click on an aircraft, you'll jump to that aircraft also at its height position. So this is how you can quickly get off of the map as far as the center of rotation being off the map surface. And so to bring it back down, you can hold your option key and drag down, and it's going to stop at the map face. You can also use keyboard controls for raising and lowering. It's the Q and the E. The WASD, that's sort of the old gamer move your map around. Those also work. And the arrow keys will do the rotation of the camera. So if you click on any of your arrow keys, you can move, and you can do all the camera movements basically from the keyboard if you like. If you're a keyboard warrior, as they used to say. Anybody that used to play Doom, we're real familiar with that one. Yes, I see Joanne, you're raising your hand. You go ahead and unmute.
If I'm an iPad, I mean, I have it on my screen now for the training, but I use my iPad primarily. How do I do all this on my iPad?
Perfect question. Okay, so the iPad is almost identical, except you're going to be using 1-touch, 2-touch, 3-touch. Those are so 1-touch drag will translate. Okay, 2-touch, which is a sort of the pinch move, that's going to do your zoom. 3-touch up and down will change the elevation of the camera, raising it up and down. And then to rotate, there's sort of two things you need to do. First thing, you minimize. So you hit that bottom button in the main button stack. And then what will happen is this sort of right-hand lower quadrant becomes sort of a hot button. One tap there and you'll see a on-screen joystick pop up, and that will rotate the camera around. Okay, and then to go back to seeing your interface, you just need to click on that bottom button to get all your interface back. All right, good question. Okay, so talked about camera movements and rotation, all that fun stuff. Let's talk about, I'm going to go clockwise around the user interface and explain everything. Okay, so we've covered most of the stuff in the bottom right. Bottom left, there are basically, we've got some branding. The SkyGlass lettering itself, if you click on that, that's going to enable and disable this sort of debug readout, which you see on the bottom, pressing complete, blah, blah, blah. Basically, that's going to give a quick description of whatever SkyGlass is doing at the time. Okay, and you'll notice it's going to change depending on what you're doing, pulling traces, loading traffic, et cetera, et cetera. This started out as just sort of a debug window for me, you know, to make sure I knew what was happening and something got stuck, but users seemed to like it. Beta testers loved it. So we left it in there, made it a little Easter egg with the SkyGlass logo. Okay. Just above that, you'll see I've got this list of icons. We've got some badges that I'm working on for the next version. We're going to buff out this sort of system. If you're part of the Monkey Nation, you'll be able to sign up and get this little badge. If you're a subscriber, if you're a feeder, if you're a SkyGlass Ace, which is a special designation for the Discord jockeys and helpers. And then if you're a beta tester, you get this little bug window. Those will be coming in a future version. Okay, so moving up to the top left, I'm going to move my camera around so it's easier to see. All right. We've got basically two sections. The top section is just going to give the current time in UTC. So it's sort of 24-hour, or not 24-hour, but in aviation is all sort of centered on UTC, you know, Greenwich Mean Time. So that's the time stamp in UTC. And then if you have a home location defined, then that will be shown and displayed in this next section. And then depending on where you have as a home location, defined as a home location, then it does a little quick weather, goes out to, you know, weather API, pulls the weather for that area. And then below it, you've got a little graphical representation of that area. Again, this is only of the the home location. So as you move your home location around, that should update. All right, next on the top right-hand corner, we have at the very top, the last load information of how many aircraft are showing and what the last load was, total showing. And then we've got a breakdown of the military and the mass flights. The little, in this case, it's got -3. That is meaning in the last load cycle, how many aircraft were pulled from display because they were stale or landed or no longer, in the returns. And then the last thing we've got is this on-screen number, which is useful because, for example, in military mode pulls all the traffic worldwide for, that are classified as military. And if you want to see what's just, over a certain area, you can move your camera over that area and the on-screen number will adjust very quickly as to what's actually on screen. So if I move in here and just get over these guys in Texas, you'll see my on-screen readout drops to, 100. As I scale back out of the States, we've got 358. If I go kind of worldwide and angle it, so I've got pretty much everybody, then the on-screen number should match what's showing. Make sense? Okay, cool. Okay, so that covers the first top line. This next big panel, what is commonly referred to as the heads-up display or HUD, and basically it's showing the information about the aircraft that was just under the mouse. So as you mouse around, you'll see that information changes, and a couple things will happen. You'll see some pop-up panels on the aircraft itself, and then that information will be also displayed in the HUD on the top right. All right, so let me pause auto refresh so things kind of stay more consistent. And let me find somebody that's, yeah, there we go. So we got a nice C-17. And so if you look on the HUD, we've got the type in green. Below that is the transponder code that it's squawking at the moment, meaning, every transponder or every aircraft has a transponder. The FAA gives them a transponder number, 4-digit code, and that basically helps them to separate the different aircraft. It's important to note transponder numbers, these codes, change every flight and can change several times over a flight, depending on, how far the aircraft's going and what the FAA wants. If the aircraft is declared an emergency, then that squawk will change immediately to represent what the emergency status is. For any of you pilots or ex-aviation folks know, 7500 is a hijacked aircraft. 7600 is, I believe that's no radio, lost comms, and 77 is a general, 7700 general emergency. So if you see something that starts with 77, you'll know something's up with that flight. Okay, moving on to the right, the top has the call sign of the aircraft. Call signs are interesting. For most general aviation aircraft, the call sign is always going to be the tail number, the registration number of the aircraft. For military, it changes every flight. For commercial aircraft, it also usually represents, Southwest 350, flight 350 will be SW 350, etc. Just important to note, the call sign is not a really good way to track an aircraft over time because it always changes. Every time they go wheels up, unless it's a general aviation aircraft, it's going to change. Okay. The next field below that has two pieces of information. The first is the aircraft registration. So that's the tail number, as it's often referred to. And then I've done algorithmically, I've decoded the hex code and figured out what country it's in. And then you've got the country designation there. You'll also notice as I move my mouse around, a few of these things have a green box. If something highlights in green or has a little green container around it, that means that if you click, it's going to take that information and put it onto the clipboard. So as you're moving, like, oh, I want to share this hex code with a friend or something, just instead of having to write it down, click on it, and then now it's on your clipboard. You can go to another app, paste, etc. All right. And so in the HUD, you basically have the call sign, this field, the registration and the country code, and then the hex code. All right, so the last thing, the hex code, this is a 6 letter hexadecimal representation of the transponder itself. So this is one of the only things that doesn't change between flights and is always consistent with the aircraft. Unless that aircraft gets a new transponder, that hex code is going to remain the same. This is really the only way to consistently, I mean, the registration number is good, but that's not as common. The hex code is specific to the aircraft that's flying at that moment. SkyGlass gets its data from the ADSB Exchange network, and that network and all of the API calls and all that kind of communication is very hexadecimal centric. So the hex code, if you're going to talk to me and go, hey, where's this aircraft? Best thing to do is grab the hex code and send that to me. Or if you communicate to others, the hex code is always a really good number to grab. Okay. Any questions on this top portion before I move on? Okay, good. Moving on. All right. So next below this is basically the aircraft telemetry. The altitude in feet. The altitude is reported in barometric pressure. Okay, this is not AGL. This is not actual ground level or geographic. It's the barometric pressure. Anybody want me to go into more detail on that, or does that make sense? The wrinkle there is, let's say if you're looking at the Denver airport, the barometric pressure that's reported may be below the actual field elevation. Barometric pressure gets a little weird. And because aircraft is reported, from the transponder itself, it broadcasts the barometric altitude, and that's translated into SkyGlass. Sometimes you'll see a aircraft that the position is underneath the ground level. Well, why does that make sense? Well, because the barometric pressure is actually pushing that readout below. So let me show you how to adjust that. In the sliders, there are a couple that are hidden. There's a button here at the top right of the slider grouping. Clicking on that will reveal these last 2 sliders. The first slider is mouse sensitivity. So if things are moving too slow or you want to be in turbo fast mode, you can raise that up, raise the mouse sensitivity, and then your drags will be very quick. Let me bring this back down to something normal. And then this second one, this blue-red, this is a barometric sort of adjustment. And basically everything that's on screen is going to bump it up or down. And so you can see everything is going up and down. And so this is just a way for you to visually kind of match up the ground level with the aircraft that are being reported. This is useful when you're zoomed in at a field and you'll see, the traces or the aircraft showing underneath. You can bump this up until it, looks correct. The bottom icon is a reset of that slider, and it's only for this barometric. So if you click on that, it's going to bring it back down to sort of the zero function or zero adjustment.
Could I throw something in there?
Say again?
Could I throw something in there?
Sure.
I noticed with the red one there, if I pick aircraft that are on the ground, and then adjust that until they just touch the ground, it seems to adjust that barometric pressure almost perfectly. In other words, if you find something with 0 altitude and you slide that slider up and down until that the icon itself actually touches the ground, it seems to put everything in perspective of the current atmospheric pressure, as it were.
Yeah, exactly. You're doing it exactly right. Thank you, Florida. Okay, so this is probably a good segue. So again, you can just click on that button on top of the slider to minimize those. And this is probably a good time to talk about this. The aircraft itself has a few different elements. There's this chevron at the very bottom of the grouping here. Then you have the profile icon of the aircraft that's kind of been decoded. It's not absolutely precise. There's only about 40 different icons that I have loaded in here, but it'll get to the class pretty well. And then you've got this upper panel, which has the detail reflected also in the HUD, as we've talked about. It's important to note two things. The chevron is the actual aircraft position. That's what represents the orientation and position based on the data being transmitted by the transponder. Okay. The icon up here is not the position. Okay. This octagon has colors and the icon itself. You can think of this octagon as a compass face, okay, like a compass rose. The orientation of the aircraft icon within that octagon represents its cardinal direction. Okay, so this is how you can quickly, from a side angle or from other kind of any kind of an angle, see the the heading of that aircraft in a general sense based on if this were a compass face. Okay, you'll also notice as you move around, all of those panels and everything always face the camera. Okay, so depending on your orientation, it can get a little weird. If you go straight up, you'll notice that these things that are kind of behind you will not, they're technically facing the camera, but they may or may not be readable. If you go to the side, then everything kind of is nice and more natural. Okay. All right, let's finish up with the HUD. There are well, the obvious is this sort of picture of the aircraft. This is driven from a crowdsourced website called Plane Spotter. If someone has actually gone out, been at the field, taken an actual photograph of that aircraft, matched it to a tail number and uploaded it to their service, then it'll be pulled, the latest screen capture, or I'm sorry, Plane Spotter image will be pulled and displayed here. Not all aircraft have Plane Spotter images like this Derby 83, but luckily the C-17 does. If you click on the picture itself, you'll get a larger picture. And if you click on the little, oops, let me load that again. If you click on the little eye information, then that's going to open up a web page of that Plane Spotter website with that aircraft. So if you want to drill down deeper into it and check it out, you can click on that. Clicking on the image itself will bring it back to the normal size. And then we've got this group of buttons on the left.
One quick question.
Yes, sir.
Does barrel altitude change when you set 2992 going above 18,000 feet?
Does that change? So technically what's happening is, for those that don't know, all aircraft that are flying at above 18,000 feet, they, instead of tuning their transponders altitude, barometric pressure to where they're over, they all sort of normalize above 18,000 feet. That's a commercial IFR, instrument flight rules, sort of convention. For the purposes of SkyGlass, again, everything is reported in barometric pressure, meaning the altitudes are barometric. So in the display, they're all going to be the same above 18,000. I don't do any extra calculation, if that makes sense. Okay, so the system and the protocol sort of does that for me, if that makes sense. Yeah, the barometric pressure changes for those that are not pilots. Every airfield, you can go 5 miles and the pressure actually, changes slightly. So every field elevation has a little weather station that pulls the barometric pressure, and then there's several of them that are scattered, hundreds of them scattered all over the planet, little weather reporting stations. And so as a airplane flies over areas, the ATC gives them an updated barometric pressure that they dial into their instruments, and then that adjusts what's being broadcast by the transponder.
So along that line, then, if we were to go out to, let's say, Death Valley, or conversely out to the Dead Sea area, the issue would be exactly the opposite, because those places are below sea level.
Well, the barometric pressure may or may not. The barometric pressure is very, very, very rarely going to match the actual elevation, right? It's called a standard day in aviation talk. But you're exactly right. But the point of this is, for the use of SkyGlass, it's impossible for me to sort of decode where every aircraft is, what the current barometric pressure is at that place, and make the adjustment. So everything is just normalized to barometric pressure. When we get into standard mode, I'll go into a field elevation, and we can kind of see this in action, so it'll make a little bit more sense to people.
All right, thank you so much.
You bet. Okay, so in the HUD, you've got the group of 6 buttons here. Starting at the top left, we've got this banner icon with a star on it. Anytime that you see a banner icon, that represents a watch list item. Okay, so to turn on, let me get back to the C-17. If I want to add this to the watch list, one way to do this is to just click on this button. It'll turn green, and then you know it's on my watch list. You'll also notice the background and the border of the octagon changed color. So this is a visual representation of if something's on your watch list or not. You can see it because it's got a different color variation. The icon itself and the color of that icon will remain the same. In mil mode, they're all the same, but as we move into standard mode, you'll see the difference between standard aircraft, masked aircraft, and of course, military that you see here. Okay, so if you want to, you can always use this button to turn it off and unload it from the watch list. The one on the right, we're not going to talk about. This is to flip into flight history mode and pull the flight history of this specific aircraft. We're not going to do that today. That's an advanced topic. These next two, so you'll notice, let me adjust the view here. So we'll get this sort of nice empty space. So you'll see there are a few extra panels underneath the HUD, which are active right now. The bottom one is the actual latitude and longitude and numbers, and then it does a little reverse geocode of that and gives you a vector to the closest metropolitan area, closest city, if there is one, and then the local time of that aircraft that's based on its time zone, etc. You'll also get a lookup of the aircraft type. Sadly, this is not as accurate as I'd like it to be, because the aircraft that's reported, the data that's reported, I only get the type, this sort of A400. And so there's a lot of variation in aircraft. This may or may not get to the correct model number, et cetera. There's a lot of detail in there, and that's something that'll be hopefully improved in the future. If you click on this target icon in the HUD, both of those go away. Okay, click on it again, and you get the location and the type decode detail there. All right. And the next one is this radio tower button. Click on that, and you'll get another, hold on, let me turn off the pop-up help so it's not going to cloud it. There we go. All right, you get this other pop-up window that goes in between, and that's giving you some more detail about the transponder. For those of us that are kind of, ADS-B nerds, this may or may not be important to you. Most people are not going to want this kind of detail, but I have access to it, so I thought it'd be good to report. The source type will show if it's in mode S, it'll display there. If it's getting if it's putting out ADS-B, or if it's MLAT, some of these things, you can kind of get more detail about what mode the transponder is in. The ICAO category and the distinction of that. For most military aircraft, a lot of this is just NANA, not available. But you can also get, like for commercial aircraft, the nav mode. If they're in autopilot, you can tell that, what kind of autopilot they have. If they've got TCAS, collision avoidance, some extra detail about that, which may be interesting. What's most important, though, I think, is this RAD-C. This means radius of containment, and that is going to be a number in meters as to the positional confidence. So you'll see, and I'll demonstrate this later as we get into standard mode, but you'll see like 75 M for the RAD-C. That means that the aircraft position that's being reported is accurate within 75 meters. That's the confidence level of that position. All right, so I'll turn that off. These next two are another pop-up panel for database. If you want to look at the information from the database in another little pop-up panel. You can click on that. I'm not going to go into that today. That's an advanced topic. And then this little horseshoe magnet, this will enable or disable a follow me mode. And follow me mode, basically, if you're in follow me mode, and then auto refresh is on, basically every time you do an auto refresh cycle, it's going to keep that aircraft in the center of the screen. Oh, let me turn that on. There we go. Okay, so the last thing that I had actually hovered over was this this false tower, and so that's in now, and I'm in follow me mode. Let me click on that. This Gulfstream, and you'll see as the auto refresh happens, even if I move the mouse away, the next time it auto refreshes, it's going to pop me back. Okay, so follow me mode is, you know, useful if that's, you know, obviously what you want to do. Not so much if you're just kind of getting a, you know, feel for military aircraft, that kind of thing. By show of hands or raise hand, is your sort of mission profile for SkyGlass just looking at military? Are these all military people? Okay. Anybody that does sort of both, standard, other stuff? Okay. And civilian only, location based? Okay. Good to know. All right. Yeah, most of Monkey Nation likes to look at military stuff. That's always fun. All right. So that covers the HUD in detail. Any questions about the HUD in the top right? Last thing to note, this button in the very right-hand top corner, that will basically disable the HUD. If you want to clear up your screen or that stuff's taking up too much space, you can turn it off, and then you just get the number readout. Okay, regardless of what you hover over. If you want to bring that back, just click on that button again and bring it back. This X only closes it temporarily. Next time you hover over something, it brings it back. Okay, any questions about the HUD? Yes, sir. Chris, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah. I have, I had the HUD up a while ago, but it's not there anymore. When I look in that up, when I click that upper right-hand corner button, it gets green and then white, but the HUD doesn't. Oh, I'm sorry. Never mind. I just decreased.
So yeah, that's
Okay.
the maybe a little confusing when you collapse it and then you turn it back on again, it's sort of waiting for you to hover over something before it will populate. So that probably
Okay.
you got to make sure it's green and then pick your target, and then you'll get the update, the readout.
Got it. Okay.
Go ahead.
I have one half of the country. The other half is just black with white lines, a white grid. So I'm just looking at the eastern part of the country at the moment.
Awesome. Okay, let me describe that. Okay, so it's a great segue. We'll move into the buttons and some of the functionality. So the map, zoom, bottom of the auxiliary button stack. So again, that's this first big grouping next to the main button stack. Main button stack is the right. Sorry if I hammered this sort of nomenclature down, but when I do tech support, this is how I refer to things. So it's good to sort of lock this down. The auxiliary button stack, bottom of that has the map zoom area. If the map tiles get wonky, they didn't load, as Chris was describing, it's just a black tile with a white box around it. That means that there was some sort of an error in the map load, and this blue half or three-quarter circle arrow, that is a map reset. Okay, let me see if I can create it and get something kind of wonky. Most often from, oh, great, perfect. So most often for me, I get this kind of a thing. The tiles half loaded, like you can see the Florida ones are all kind of off the center. It doesn't look right. Clicking on this will basically dump all the tiles, reload them all, and everything should normalize again. So if you hit that button now, those black tiles should fill in. All right, so let me zoom back in and reset. Oh, reload. Okay, you may want to adjust the zoom level. You may be zoomed in, and so you're only seeing a portion of the screen. If you zoom out, then more of the country will fill in. You should be able, let me make an adjustment and demonstrate that a little bit. So I'm going to zoom in a lot. You can see all the tiles are. All right, let's do that again. I don't know where I'm homed. Okay, let me get my mouse position back over the States. Let's get over Florida. And I'm going to reload my traffic by hitting that top button. All right, all right, this is a good learning tool here. So you'll notice I've made some map changes and things don't look exactly right. There's a bug in the program and everything's sort of shifted off a little bit and the reset isn't helping. So if you look in the auxiliary button stack, about halfway up, you'll see this burn button. The burn is very useful. If something gets a little, doesn't seem right, and you want to sort of clear the field, wipe the screen, that's the burn button. Basically, it will unload all the aircraft positions, unload all the traces. Basically, it kind of cleans up the memory, and then you can reload the traffic and everything will be hopefully back to its original position or accurate position. Okay, so I'm zoomed in enough to where we're only seeing the United States. If I start translating over, you'll see those maps, you know, another group of tiles will fill in and the ones on the left will fall away. Okay, you see that? And if we come back over, they'll start filling back in and dropping off on the other side. Okay, that's basically just keeping the map loaded underneath what you've got going on or what you're viewing. All right. Okay, so everything's looking good. Let's keep talking about the auxiliary button stack. Okay, so the map zoom we've covered. This next group is sort of map functionality, display functionality. This vertical slider group that just basically toggles these vertical sliders. They're on by default. This next one is brings up the different map styles. It's the default is the satellite map. Personally, I really like this sort of green dark map. Really good for sort of dark mode, you know, for mobile devices, stuff like that. Again, it's all whatever your preference is. There are some light map styles as well. And you'll notice then there's a couple of buttons on the bottom. The default is for the map to be actually flat. There's no geographic elevation that's represented in the map. I made this the default flat map just to conserve memory and processor. If you turn this on, then you'll get the elevation of the topography, but there's a memory hit and a processor hit. So, but you can turn that on. It's, you know, if you're in a mountainous area and you're zoomed in on the map, that may be useful to actually turn that on, and then you'll see the elevation of the topography of the map itself. And then when you're highly zoomed in, you can turn buildings on. Again, this is a very kind of a massive memory and processor hit, so it's off by default, but if your computer can handle it, you may want to turn that on if you're, you know, zoomed in on a city block or something like that. So basically, map styles is this folded map icon. The next button over is the target. Turn that on, and you've got another panel that opens up here where you can enter a home location. This is how the way you can manually change your home location. When we go into standard mode, I'll talk more about that. So I'll sort of drop it for now, turn that off. When you flip out of military mode and into standard mode, this turns on by default as well, or automatically. All right. The next one is the different type or different list panels. First one is the type list panel. Turn this on and you'll see this list box populate on the right, and it basically has all the aircraft that are flying and their types decoded. You can resize it, etc. We'll go into that a little bit more in a moment. I'll turn that off. Same thing with the watch list. You can activate the watch list panel. Oh, let me turn on auto refresh. There we go. Again, my watch list is clean right now, so we'll get into that a little bit later. And then this next one is your favorite places. So let me cover that now because I forgot last time. Okay, so when you turn on your favorite places list, you get this additional sub panel that pops up. There are two that are automatically there by default, CONUS, Continental United States, and then Europe. If you want to add a favorite place, this is how you do that. If your location chooser is not enabled, you can click on that target, bring up the favorite place. Bring up the location chooser. This is an entry box, so you can put in basically almost anything. This is sort of a general language, entry field box. You can put in the name of a state, you can put in the name of a city, you can put in like DFW, name of the 3-letter identifier of an airport. Hit enter, and that will change the location. Move the camera to that center, or centered on that position. It'll show the latitude and longitude readouts. And then if you look closely, let me angle the camera. We've got this green box that shows the search distance. Again, this is only applicable when you're in standard mode. When you're in military mode, it pulls all military aircraft worldwide, so the search radius doesn't really apply. But since we're working the process of adding a favorite place, we've created this home location. That's now dialed in. We've seen the latitude and longitude change. The camera popped over. You'll notice on the top left, we've got the DFW now listed, so we know that's our home location. Okay, so now we come back to this favorite home locations panel. If you click on the little teardrop with the plus sign, now we've got a new entry based on our whatever we typed in here. For example, you
Question?
could, yes, sir.
Whatever you name it, you still have to go to the position where you want that point to be, correct? In other words, if you want it to be Australia and you type in Australia, you still have to drag your pointer down to Australia and put the mark there, correct?
No. So let me do that. AUSTRALIA. When you hit enter, or if you click on this button, oh, that didn't work. Oh yeah, it did. Okay. I thought that was Alaska for a second there. Okay, it will move the camera and move the target position to that location. Okay. Just to finish up with this favorite locations panel, to delete this favorite location from the list is the teardrop with the X. If you want to change the label of that, you click on this little pencil button, and that will make this an input. So you can say Dallas, Fort Worth. Okay, hit enter again, that saves it. The other piece to note here in this favorite locations panel, this entry is clickable in two different ways. This sort of jumper target will jump, meaning it zooms your camera to that location. I'll do that now. You can see the map moved and things will tile in as you go. Let me go between CONUS and Dallas. So if I click on CONUS, that's going to go to the center of the United States. You'll see it just moves the camera over, right? It doesn't change the home location to that entry. If you click on the word itself, that's when it changes the home location, and it actually pops, doesn't zoom, if that makes sense. So let me do that. So now I'm going to click on the Dallas Fort Worth lettering itself, and you'll notice the camera pops, and now my home location has changed. So we see Dallas Fort Worth in the top right, et cetera, et cetera. If I click on CONUS, the words, it pops, and then it updates the home location, versus this little zoom icon, which just moves the camera. See the difference? Depending on what you're doing and what you have loaded, for example, if you've got a bunch of traces loaded, it may be a little faster to zoom over rather than to pop over and have to reload all of the map. You know, if you're off screen and it does require a reload. So like if I click on this Europe one, it's going to, in my experience, move a little faster, again, based on the map zoom, etc. There are a lot of variables with the user interface. Okay, so that covers the favorite locations panel. I'm going to go ahead and delete. Well, I'll keep it up for now. Okay, but I'll turn it off. So that's the icon, this far right of the three. Turn that off. All right, let me pause. Any questions? Okay, all good. I'll keep moving forward. All right, this next box group in the auxiliary button stack is useful for, this is kind of like how to reset stuff. The first one is, let me turn on the help again. The first one is resetting the camera's rotation and position. All right, so let's say, for example, you've got yourself in a weird position and you don't know how you got here, something doesn't look right, or you're off map, something just wants, you click on this 2 arrows square box, and it's basically going to bring the camera back to the home location and reorient the perspective so that it's more natural. Does that make sense? All right, cool. Also, if you're zoomed way out, it's going to reset the zoom. It basically resets all the camera parameters back to how you started. Okay, the next one, the stop sign. If you are trying to do something and your computer has sort of ground to a halt, it's stopped, or you've done something you didn't intend to do and it's taking a long time, such as I turned on traces for all aircraft for 24 hours, and it's taken forever. This is how you just kind of arrest whatever SkyGlass is trying to process. Okay, so and this is very helpful if you're in standard mode and you've got too large of a search radius to find, and it's loading too many aircraft and you want to stop it, kind of restart it. The stop will stop all loading actions. The burn button is probably the most useful. This is the best way to just clear the slate and start again. Okay. Also note, when you burn, it's going to automatically turn off the auto refresh. Okay, so some people think, oh, I burned and now nothing's happening. Well, all you need to do is either do a snapshot load, which is this top button, or you can just turn on auto refresh and that'll initiate a load and then get you back into auto refresh mode. Okay, so in this next group, I'm going to talk about a few things pretty quickly. The center icon is advanced features. I'd recommend staying away from those until, the class that I'm teaching on that stuff, or until you're feeling adventurous and you got all the basics down. That has time travel mode, flight histories, if you're, source options, feeders, and then a whole color adjustment stuff. We're not going to get into that now. The center icon in the bottom is the jumper. I find this incredibly useful. So right now, and by default, the jumper is on. Let me talk about the jumper a little bit. The jumper has several functionalities or several functions. If you double click anywhere on the map, you'll notice that the center of the camera will zoom over to that location. Okay, so I'm double clicking. And let me zoom in a little bit. You'll also notice a couple things that happen. If I translate over, you'll see that now my camera center location target is separated from the jumper itself. If I double click, it moves the jumper and brings the camera, so now they're co-located. This jumper has a few different elements. It has this big teardrop, which is clickable. I'll talk about that in a second. And then it has a readout on the above it. And you'll notice that that readout doesn't face the camera. It sort of stays, stuck to the map. Okay. It'll display the latitude and longitude of where you clicked. So you can see it adjusts. And then it does a reverse geolocation lookup and displays that. All right. So like, let's go to Cuba, double click there, and I'll double click somewhere else. This reverse geolocation lookup is incredibly precise. If you zoom the map in and click on a street corner, it'll give you the address. Okay. It's super precise. The big teardrop, you'll notice when my mouse is over it, it turns green. That means this is clickable. It turns a dark green. If I click on it, now I've changed my home location to where that jumper is. Okay, so you'll notice Big Cypress, Florida is now listed in my top left-hand corner. Let me clean this up a little bit. Boom. Okay. And then you'll also notice now there are 3 icons on the map face that are co-located. So let me separate them out a little bit. All right, so I'm dragging my camera over. I'm going to double click. Okay, so here's the different targets that are meaningful to you. Purple, as you know, the center of the camera. The orange is the home location. And then the blue is the jumper. Okay, so let me again click near Miami. The camera moves over, the jumper is there. I now click on the large target. And now my home location jumps to where my jumper is. Okay.
Question?
Yes.
Can you add that now to your favorite locations list that we had at the bottom, CONUS in Europe and everything? Can you now attach that and name it?
Exactly. I just worked that process. I just did it. I turned on the favorite locations panel,
Right.
clicked on the plus sign, and now I've got that location and pulled in the address. And if you wanted to give that change the label, then you click on the pencil, type in
Okay.
something different and save.
Got it.
Perfect question. So let me do that now. Boom. South Florida. Enter, and now it's locked in. Cool. All right. Good stuff. Okay, so how I use the jumper. I love the jumper to just move around instead of clicking and dragging. I mean, clicking and dragging works, but if I want to move to Europe or, somewhere in particular, South America, I'll just start double clicking around and it kind of just zooms me over to that area. So I like to zoom way out, double click, and then zoom in. That's how I use the jumper. And again, you can use the jumper to define your home location. That's useful. The other thing that the jumper toggles is if the jumper is on, if you click on an aircraft, then your camera will jump to that aircraft's position, meaning it'll make it center stage. So let's do that on this 737. Click on the icon. And now my center of rotation, if I zoom in, you'll see that little purple target is right over the chevron. You all see that? Now, what's important to note is now my center of rotation of the camera has now been elevated to that aircraft's position. So as I rotate around, I'm not rotating based on the flat, map surface. Now I'm up high. So this is another reason why I use the jumper. Double click on the jumper and it brings my camera center down to the map level, which it feels more normal for most folks. Okay, so if the jumper's on, let me just reiterate that. Click on an aircraft, moves that aircraft to the center. And if you zoom in, you can actually, get a sense of it here. All right. Double click on the map, moves the camera back down to the map surface. Okay. I'm gonna pause for questions. Anything? Okay, you all are sucking this up 100%. I should have a quiz.
This is
All right.
slick.
What was that?
This is slick. It's
I'm
nice.
glad you're liking it. Glad you're liking it. Okay, so let's see. We talked about the jumper. If you want to get back to the login portal, you can click on this profile button here. That's basically going to bring this up. This is kind of a placeholder for more functionality. Your badges and stuff like this will probably be managed through this. So this will build out more in the future. But basically, if you need to get back, if you need to update your email, this is where to do it. So if you're already logged in and you need to update the email that SkyGlass sends messages to, this is where you do that. Get back in it, you click on Enter SkyGlass. Okay, and we talked about the follow me mode. The database we're not going to get into today. These last few, let's start with the sweeper. The sweeper, this little broom icon, is very important. It's on by default, and I would leave that on unless you specifically need to turn it off. So what does the sweeper do? Basically, the sweeper, let me turn auto refresh back on. Basically, the sweeper will remove any aircraft that has not been updated in 3 auto refresh cycles. Okay, so if you have your auto refresh set to 30 seconds and that aircraft position has not updated in 90 seconds, it's going to get removed from the field. Okay, if you leave that on, if you turn off the sweeper, then any aircraft that stops reporting is going to stay on screen. Okay, so it's going to start to give you inaccurate results depending on what your settings are. Okay, it can be useful in certain circumstances. For example, if I wanted to look at all of the aircraft that came through a specific location over a 12-hour period, let's say, then I would dial in that location, get my search radius down, turn off the sweeper, and then let it go. And I walk away from it for 12 hours, come back, and any aircraft that came through and stopped reporting will still be stuck on my screen. And I'll be able to kind of see, oh, wow, I see this came through. So in some circumstances, it may be useful. Most often, you're going to want to keep that on so that you keep a nice, accurate representation of the field. Does that make sense? Okay, good. All right. The magnifying glass is the basic search function. Click on there, and you've got this little search input box where you can type in anything either. And so there's 4 ways to search. You can search on the hex code, you can search on the call sign, you can search on the tail number, or the transponder squawk code. Little data point. It's interesting. So folks that are familiar with aviation, all general aviation aircraft, those that are not flying in IFR or controlled environments, will squawk. Their transponder will be 1200. You can actually search on 1200, and it'll pull all of the aircraft that are flying general aviation across the planet. Kind of a cool thing. I didn't even know it. Tried it, fell into that, and thought, oh, it's kind of interesting. Most of them will be nice and flying low, but maybe useful for some folks. Anyway, so you can search on transponder code. All right, and so let me just give you an example of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on the HUD. I'm going to hover. I'm going to pull that call sign onto my clipboard by clicking on it when it's green. And now I'm going to clear the field with the burn button. And in my search, I'm going to paste that call sign and then search by call sign. And what's going to do, if it's successful, it'll pop out a little window temporarily that says success. And then it'll go away. If it failed, it'll tell you it failed. And then it'll do a pull, a query for that aircraft and pull that position. All right, so let me turn auto refresh back on. So we'll get the rest of the military folks coming up. Okay. All right, so let me turn off the search. So we'll hide that sub panel. All right, and let me turn off auto refresh just so we'll clean up the interface. Okay, so last one in the auxiliary button stack is this filter icon. That governs this first box here, which I'll talk about now, and then I'll talk about the advanced. It's a good segue into standard mode. So this basically will toggle on and off for all aircraft these pop-up panels. So let me pull up somebody closer. There we go. Whoa, there we go. Okay. So the panels that pop above the aircraft, which are the same as the HUD information. Let me turn off the HUD. You can turn those, there are 3 different sections of this. You can turn them on or off for all aircraft by this filter icon. So let me demonstrate. So if you want to turn on just the types and the transponders, you click on this little tag icon and you'll see all the different aircraft now show the type. I'll turn those off. If you want to show the call sign and transponder labels, you click there. And then if you want to look at the telemetry, you can toggle it there, or you can gang them all up and turn everything on. This is also where it may be useful to then adjust your zoom, or we'll bring the sliders back up and adjust the scale and kind of declutter what you're looking at. Personally, since I don't have the Air Force background that Monkey does, I like to turn on the types so that I can kind of say, oh yeah, because I can't necessarily pull out a difference, between a bomber and a refueler, but I know the difference between a K-35R and a B-52, right? So I can look at the type and kind of and scan the field then and see. All right, and then this last one is the well, there's 2, obviously. This last one is the aircraft icon. If you want to turn off the icons and just show the chevrons of the aircraft position, that's how you can do that. All right, while I'm in this mode, let me tell you the different colors and what they represent from the chevrons. And so the chevron, again, is just the little triangular model icon, or it's a 3-dimensional representation of the aircraft's position in space and its orientation. Green, if it's green, that means it's climbing. If it's red, that means it's descending. And if it's this sort of teal blue, that means it's level flight, or less than 50 feet per minute up or down, basically level flight. Okay, let me turn the aircraft icons back on. We'll click there. This final one, this basically will show the owner operator as another little readout on the bottom of this label group. I'm not going to, in military mode, especially when you're over CONUS, it's not very useful because it just says US military. When you're in Europe, it may be more useful because you've got different aircrafts from different countries, et cetera, and you can quickly look at the country codes. All right, so let me just demonstrate that. Hold on, I'm getting some questions here. Hold on a second. Yes, that's true. So I'm just seeing some questions in the chat. Yes, I will be providing a link to everybody that attended. I'll send out another email with the recording. I also post this on the SkyGlass crew area on the website. And if you want it, you can always just ping me too, and I can send it to you directly. Okay. Oh, Joanna to bail. Okay, got it. Okay, perfect. All right. So let me pause there. Any questions?
Hey, Russ here from Florida.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Hey, I missed this is a wonderful piece of code, by the way.
Thank you.
Did you write it all?
Every single line of it.
Well,
Well,
I've been a coder for 36 years and wow, my hat is off to you.
thank you, sir. I appreciate that feedback.
How do I get into military mode again? I had a phone call I had to take.
No problem. Okay, good. Perfect segue. Let me just, I love asking for when you guys have questions so that I can take a drink and give my pipes a rest. Hold on a second.
We could talk for 4 days, buddy.
Oh boy. That's why we had to break this up into different deep dives and intros. Okay. So, perfect segue. So let me clean up my interface a little bit. I'm going to turn off the sliders. And so to switch modes out and into military mode is this shield icon. Okay. If it's green, that means you're in military mode. When you're in military mode, a couple things happen as well. So let me talk a little bit more in depth about the main button stack here. This first icon, when you're in military mode, it's going to show as a fighter. Okay. When you're out of military mode and you're in standard mode, as I just did there, you can see it changes to a commercial aircraft icon. You'll also notice that the background inner circle changed to blue. Let me go back into military mode. And you'll see that that changes, goes through a fighter, and then it also shows orange. So that is a color representation of, you know, what mode you're in and what your source is. If any of you all are, is anybody a feeder? Ren, I know you're a feeder. Anybody else a feeder? Couple of blank stares. Nobody knows what a feeder. Okay, so feeders are those awesome folks that make this whole thing go. There are over 9,000-ish individuals like me, like Ren, who have antennas mounted on their roof or sticking out a window that are attached to little Raspberry Pis that actually receive all these transponder location information in real time and then feed into the ADSB Exchange network. And that's what feeds SkyGlass. We'll do a deep dive on how to feed, what feeders like, and all that kind of stuff. If you're a feeder, you can display your feed, like exactly what your antenna is picking up within SkyGlass. And when you're in that mode, then that color changes as well from this yellow or blue to a magenta. So that's a kind of a visual representation of what your source is as well, is this background color. While I'm here, you'll notice there are two sort of wheels or circles around or inside this white area. But outside of the background color, you'll see this yellow one is sort of counting down. That's a visual representation of how much time is left in the auto refresh. So you'll see that as that counts down, and it'll reload and then populate, or, you know, wrap back around. You'll notice as it's loading, the green circle is a representation of the process, the progress of the load. In military mode, it's so fast you don't even see it fill in, but in other modes, you'll see it'll you know, chunk all the way through and fill in, and so you can tell how far it is in that load cycle. Okay, we've talked about the auto refresh. That's how you turn that on and off. This is the military mode switch. This is enabling and disabling traces. This camera icon will take a screenshot. Always encourage you to take screenshots, share on social, spread the word, spread the love. This next one is the preference panel. Open up the preference panel. And then this bottom one, or second to bottom, is the pop-up help toggle. So it's on by default. And like you can see, we've got this show above the button stacks. You've got this window, which will show you, you know, as you hover over basically any button or element, it'll give you a quick representation or read, you know, description of that functionality. Okay, so let's go deeper into standard mode. So I'm going to click on the shield. We'll switch into standard mode. And you'll notice a few things happened. First, it's going to wipe and burn all aircraft, anything that's loaded. Okay. You'll also notice, let me use my jumper to pop over here. You'll also notice that this location chooser came back on the screen, and we have an additional pop-up panel with these different 4 icons. These are the aircraft classes, okay? Sort of like genus of the aircraft world. And basically they're in 3 different groupings with a little extra. So the first one is the normies, standard aircraft. Basically that means that anything that's not classified as military or classified as a masked aircraft falls into standard aircraft. Standard aircraft are commercial aircraft, general aviation aircraft, anything that's flying that's registered, that's part of the FAA system, that's not a masked or military, okay? A military we're all familiar with. Masked is very interesting. So the masked category, and again, masked is something that I labeled within SkyGlass. That's just a SkyGlass-centric nomenclature. There are 2 programs that the FAA has which filter out aircraft from public data feeds, okay? To be a masked aircraft doesn't mean that they're like flying invisibly or something like that. No, they have to have their transponder on. They're part of the air traffic control system. FAA can always see them, but if you go out to a website which is pulling the data from the FAA, the FAA will scrub these aircraft out of the returns before they send them out to for public consumption. Okay. ADSB Exchange has no relationship with the FAA. They have no contracts. They're not obligated or required to filter. And so that's how we can display these masked aircraft. And basically, they've been crowdsourced as to what type they are because they don't show up in the public feeds, but we can see them. They're transmitting. They're masked. The two different programs are the what's called PIA, Private Identification. Oh shoot, I'm forgetting that. PIA. You can Google that one. And then LAD, LADD, Limited Aircraft Data Display. The most common, virtually 99%, are in the LAD program. The PIA is only for, it's a special categorization for folks that have been given permission by the FAA to have like rolling hex codes. So like a transponder manufacturer that is testing transponders in flight, they may be part of the PIA network. They've been given a block of rolling hex codes. And they have a masked categorization. Those aircraft will show up with a green aircraft profile icon. The LAD programs show purple, this magenta color. Okay, so let me give you some examples. When you're in standard mode, you are limited by a search radius. Okay, and as you can see, when we switch into standard mode, our home location, which happens to be somewhere around Miami, has this green box. If I grab this slider and increase the search radius, you can see we've got a visual representation of the search radius on the map. All right, so now let me pick something that's a little more central Florida. So I've double clicked. I'm going to click on the jumper teardrop icon to switch the home location. Now that's moved, and now you can see the search radius box has updated as well. All right, so I've got about 200 miles. Let's make this 150. And now I'm going to load traffic. Now, before I do that, I'll tell you, we have all 4 classes on, okay? If you're less than 200 miles and you're over a metropolitan area like Florida or New York or San Francisco or LAX, something like that, you need to keep this search radius low if you're going to have all aircraft on, okay? The normies have such numbers that it's very easy to overwhelm SkyGlass for almost every type of maxed out system, gaming unit, whatever. It's just too much stuff to load in the 3D environment. So keep that search radius low. Technically you can try and buff this out to something large, but let's just demonstrate here. Keep it low, 150 miles. All types are enabled, and I'll load traffic. Okay, and you'll already see, well, this is kind of not useful from a visual perspective, so let's tune it. I'm going to bump the map zoom in. Well, I'm going to wait for this to finish loading. You'll notice that we've got a little temporary readout here on the bottom of the auxiliary button stack that tells you if SkyGlass is doing something and to please wait for it to finish before you try and do something else. There's a lot of openness in SkyGlass in the sense that you can keep doing stuff, but you could cause problems for yourself if it's doing something that it wants to kind of have all the resources. So when something like that is happening, it's going to pop up and say, please wait, with a little progress thing that says it's still moving. Okay. So as you can see, we've got a bunch of stuff off screen. This is not very useful. So let's make this more useful. I'm going to bump the map zoom in. Let's do it once. Let's do it twice. And 3 times a charm. All right, so now we're getting some spacing between. We can also turn the sliders on and adjust the size of these aircraft icons to be, something that's useful for us. And then you can adjust the height as well. Notice that as I started to bring this down, a bunch of stuff that was like off the top of the screen, now we've brought into view, right? So it's useful to remember when I zoom in, you may want to bring that height adjustment slider down so that you're actually seeing stuff that's on the higher flight levels. Okay, so let me rotate around here, and I'm going to bring the camera up a little bit. Okay, good. So we've got all three colors represented here in the field. We've got a bunch of blues. Those are all the normies. Okay. If you click on the icon, you can disable that class. And so now we're just left with the masked aircraft and the military aircraft. Okay. If I turn the masked off, now we're essentially in military mode for a defined location. So this may be useful for folks if you want to focus your attention on a specific area, switch into standard mode, turn off those aircraft classes, and just look at the class that you're wanting, in this case, military mode. Is this making sense? Okay. Pat, it cracks me up with your virtual background. I think you're actually out there standing in a field. I keep thinking, where's this computer? Where's SkyGlass? I love it. Okay, so let me turn on the masked aircraft, and you can see, so basically you can toggle these on and off in real time, and it's going to keep what the load, what that data was for it to redisplay. If you change the search radius, you'll need to do another auto refresh cycle, or let it auto refresh, or do another snapshot load to get those aircraft in the larger radius. If I bring this down to like 50, there we go, and turn my auto refresh down to like 10 sec, or let's make it 5 seconds, then you'll see as these outer aircraft become stale, they're removed from view. Poof, poof goes, pop goes the weasel, poof, they go away. Okay, so, and then let's increase that again. And now as it auto refreshed, it fills back in. Okay, so if you have your normies off, standard aircraft off, the blue people, then you can do things like this. We can map zoom out. I can pop to my favorite location, CONUS, which is center of the United States, and then pull the map zoom out to something large. And now I've got, and let the auto refresh cycle back up or take a snapshot. And now I can load all of the aircraft military of these different classes. And you'll notice now that we're at 600 or so, this is where SkyGlass starts to kind of bump up to limits on processor and RAM. Anything above 500, 600, 1,000, it's going to slow down. Okay. It really is slow in the initial rendering of the aircraft. Once they're rendered, the updates are lightning fast. So you can, if you, say if you wanted to do, military and masked for the whole United States, like we have here, we've got, it'll be probably 800, 900 aircraft. Wait for it to finish, and then you'll notice the update speed will still be very fast. Boom. Faster. There we go. Okay. And let me adjust the view here. All right, cool. Yeah, when I finally got this coded, I was shocked to see, as you can see here on the screen, there are typically 3x the number of masked aircraft that are than military. And so again, so masked, let me finish. I know I talked about the PIA, LAD, limited aircraft data display. Basically, it's a pay to play. You register with the FAA, pay their fee, and now you're part of the masked system. For whatever reason, these folks want to do it. But again, this is, to me, a bizarrely high number of folks that have wanted to be in that sort of, I don't want to be publicly viewed from these other services like Flight Radar 24, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. And again, you can toggle these on and off. The other categorization here on the filter panel of class is emergency, which is this one here. let me turn off the mast and let's see if there's any emergencies happening. So one thing I hadn't spoken of yet in this search radius box is there's an all toggle. So this is where you can actually turn on all. The search radius has no meaning now, and it's actually going out and gathering, it pulls from the service every aircraft that's flying. Okay, so this is sort of how to manually get into military mode. There's a distinction though, and some of this is, based on the types of API calls, the application programmer interface calls that I can make to the service, the ADSB Exchange service. The all actually casts a slightly wider net, meaning in standard military mode, it's only going to be pulling aircraft that are in ADSB transmit mode. If I go to all, it will pull other aircraft that might be in mode S or something that doesn't have quite the accuracy that ADSB does. So it may be something to experiment with, or if you find something is not found, or you see it on another service but not here, it may be because it's transmitting in a mode that isn't captured in the primary search methods. Okay, so as an example, this is where we found these weird high flyers by going into all mode, because the high flyers don't normally transmit on ADSB. They're mode S. Okay, where was I going with that? Oh, emergency mode. Okay, so if the emergency is on and we've got all enabled, this is kind of a view of like only emergency aircraft that will squawk. Unfortunately, nothing is actually transmitting on the emergency band right now, or not band, but their squawk code is not set to an emergency status, so we're not getting anything. If we did, there would be another list panel that would populate here with a list of all those aircraft, what the transponder code was, what the description of that was, and you can click on it to zoom to that aircraft. Okay. So, right. So let me go, unless we've got any questions. Let me pause here for
Real
questions.
quick, I missed it with how to speed that load up again. Can you show this again real quick?
To speed up the load.
Yeah, it says for the processor, you said that it made it quicker loading or something like that.
Okay, so, right. So in order to keep your computer and to keep SkyGlass from getting out into the outer limits where there's too much information, the main thing is to limit your search radius and limit the classes of aircraft. And for the most part, you're going to want, if your search radius is anything larger than 200 miles, you're going to want to turn off the standard traffic, the blue icon. Okay. If the normies, the blue aircraft, standard aircraft are off, then you can easily get away with the the military aircraft and probably the massed aircraft. Hey, we got an emergency. Look at that. So SD1 Nordo, meaning no radio. So I click on him and we can see. So now, I'm glad this happened. So you'll see, this is a standard aircraft. Okay, any aircraft, whether it's military, commercial, general, masked, they can declare an emergency and become an emergency aircraft, right? And so SkyGlass will ignore the classes that you have if the emergency toggle is on. Does that make sense? So now you can see the emergency is handled with a red border and the yellow flashing icon. And then you can tell by the aircraft color that this is not a masked or military aircraft. Make sense? All right, so I'm going to turn that off. You'll see that panel goes away and that aircraft went away as well. All right, how are we doing on time? Got about 20 minutes left. I can go over, but we're bumping up to the declared limit. All right, so let me, I'm going to go back into, unless we have another question. Yes, Russ, I can tell you you're going for the mute.
No question, but a sidebar. My grandfather was the mechanic that tuned up the Spirit of St. Louis before it flew over. And he also went to Paris to greet him. And he was also the last guy to touch the engine of Admiral Byrd when he flew over the North Pole.
Wow.
Yeah,
Well, you get some real legacy there, Russ. That's impressive.
it's amazing. That's why I'm looking. Yeah.
That is very cool. Thanks for
Just
that
interesting.
sidebar. Wow, right on. Wow. And Admiral Byrd, boy, there's some history with him too, huh? Project was it High Jump, et cetera, et cetera? Wow. Okay, good stuff. All right, so I'm gonna switch into military mode, and you'll see that when I do that, some of these panels will go away, and we're back into worldwide, and other things will start to populate. Military mode, when you switch into military mode, I've set the default to automatically go into auto refresh. While I'm talking about auto refresh, you'll notice, I think I was saying before, maybe this was the question that you had about optimization. The first initial load always takes the longest. Meaning if you've increased the search radius or you've switched into modes, when it first has to render that aircraft, that takes longer. Updating its position becomes very fast. So depending on your settings, you may want to take the auto refresh and make that longer until everything is loaded. And then you can bring this down to, the lowest is 1 second, and it's just going to populate and update quickly. Okay. You can get yourself into a position where, depending on the settings, where your auto refresh timing is lower than it takes to actually load everything, and SkyGlass is going to get behind itself, way far behind the 8 ball, and it could cause some problems. So if things don't seem to be behaving, you can turn the auto refresh up and let things sort of catch up. Look for this little bar across the bottom if it says please wait, etc. And those are some of your signals. Okay. All right, so let's talk about the type list panel. I'm going to turn that on. Type list panel is there. Okay. And is that readable, or should I make it a little bit larger? Make it a little bit larger. Okay. So a few things happening here. I'm going to turn on traces as well. We'll kind of cover this as well. Okay. So in the type list panel, you have all the different entries of all the different types that are flying, that are in the returns. By default, they are sorted by the number of aircraft. So right now we've got more NAs flying than anything else, 75 that are transponding without a type. So they're NAs. And then we've got the text 2s, 35 K35Rs. All right. If you click on one of these entries, it will turn blue. I'm sorry, I'm left clicked, right? So a standard left button click. It's going to turn blue. And in the field, you'll notice everything else went away. So now we're in an isolate mode for that type. And you can gang these up. You can click on the C-17s, and now you'll see those populate, right? Let me adjust some of the things here so we can see. You can click on other ones, C-130s, and you can sort of fill in just those types that you want while you're in isolate mode. Okay. Clicking on it again with the left button will disable that. And once you've disabled the last isolate, everything will come back. In the same way, you can sort of peel them back. If you right click on a type, you'll notice it'll turn red, and all of those have been removed from view. So if you watch the text 2s, I right click on that, you'll see all those go away. And you can set it, this is how Monkey does when he says, okay, let's pull out the trainers, right? And just be left. So this is how you can pull those trainers, text 2s. What's the other one? T38s, not many of those. And then you can see the on-screen number and get an accurate view of military aircraft that are active flying missions of some type on screen, 184. Okay, so again, left click, isolate, right click, hide.
And
And
then
then-
mobile app, it's different.
On mobile, a initial click will isolate it. Another tap, I'm sorry, I should say tap. First tap, isolate, next tap, hide, next tap, back to normal. So you kind of have to cycle through them because we don't have a left or right click or an option thing. Okay. Now, if you've got a bunch that are hidden and isolated and blah, 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 and you're like, I don't want to click them all through, you can click on the, in the type header, there are two arrows in a circle, and you click on that and it basically will remove all of those settings and bring you back to the standard view. Okay. All right. So for this next bit, I'm going to, let's just look at the K35Rs. All right. And you'll notice when I pick on any of these types, another pop-up panel will show, and these are all the aircraft of that type. Okay. And you'll notice these are all clickable. If I click on one, it's going to zoom to that location. If I click on the word or the icon or the word. Okay. If you click on the banner, it's going to add it to the watch list, as we've seen before. So anytime you see a banner somewhere, if you click it, it's going to add it to the watch list. All right. And again, all these panels have these little resize handles in the top right-hand corner. So you can drag it and resize the panel, and it's going to automatically count and create columns, etc. Okay. Or you can just sort of make it smaller and not have to see it. Okay. So back to the type list panel, there are a couple icons on the far right of this. We've got a trace icon, and then we've got this color swatch. Okay, so let me turn on the traces. Okay, so if you'll notice, we've got traces enabled already from the main button stack. Traces are set to 30 minutes, so the depth, let's bump that up to 1 hour. Let's make 1 hour. Okay, and then so primer on traces. When trace mode is enabled, if you click on any aircraft, it will load that trace based on the depth that you have dialed in. If you change the depth, it will update all those aircraft that are found. So you can see this 3 hour, 1 hour, a little bit shorter, 30 minutes even shorter, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so let's get this up to 3 hours so we can sort of see some real differences there. Okay, click on another aircraft, it's going to load that trace as well. Click on it again, and it'll unload the trace. Okay. If you want to turn off all the traces and unload them all, let me get that one back up. You can just disable traces and they'll all get pulled. Okay. So back to the type list panel and the type or the trace icon here. You'll notice I've turned traces off, but if I click on this button in the type list panel, they're going to turn back on. And now what it's doing is now loading the traces of every aircraft in that group. So this is cool. I love to actually do this, do this exactly. Look at the refuelers and then pull a nice, good long trace, 3, 6, 12, 18 hours. And now you can see very quickly where the refueling stops are for the fighters, right? You can see the little marshalling pattern, as they're called. Like he's just starting one and one over here. Okay, so now if I click on the little color swatch next to the trace icon, so traces are colorized by type. And to adjust the color, you click on the swatch, that's going to bring up this little extra color picker. And now you can adjust the colors. So I can say, all right, let's make I'll pick yellow and say that's the start color. And you'll notice now I've got a little preview bar along the bottom of the start and the end color. And now it's been updated in the field. So now let's say magenta end, and you can see they've updated. So this is how you can colorize the starting and end position of that aircraft type. Now let's do another one. Let's pull up C-17s. I'll enable traces for that type. Again, we're at 3 hours. And I'll wait for those to load. And now I'll click on that color bar and say, all right, let's pull something that's significantly different. Let's start, make them blue. And I'll close that color window. And now you can kind of quickly see, you can color separate these different types based on the colors that you choose. Last thing to note is when you pull up the color bar, the start is the oldest aircraft position, meaning if you've got a 3-hour trace, that's what was 3 hours ago. The end ends at the aircraft, right? That's the most current position. So you'll see that like these K-35Rs, they're ending at magenta and they start at yellow, meaning they took off yellow and then the trace ends there. So that's how you can kind of get a visual indicator of the path over time. What's older, what's newer. Making sense?
Is there a way to put those back then to default?
No, that's a good, nobody's ever asked me that before. That's a good one. So the other wrinkle here is that they're not standardized. There is no default color. When you first install SkyGlass, it basically randomly picks start and end colors for all the different types, and then you can go and tune them. I'm going to make a note of that. I think I should come up with a standard colorization and make that the default, and then you can tune as you want. That's sort of one of those legacy things that I just haven't gotten around to fixing. All
As
right.
if you didn't have enough going on already.
It's true. It's true. This is going to be one of these things too. Like some of you may know, there's some shareability now with the watch lists, right? You can create a watch list, export it, send it to a friend, they can import it. Now we're being able to do that from the cloud server. So this is going to be one of these things we'll be able to do is share settings. And colorization, the color table will be one of those settings that you'll be able to share. All right. Let me make a note of that. Good one. All right. You get a gold star for the day. Okay. To close this color picker, you just pick up, there's a little X on the top right-hand corner. Okay. And you can change the way the type list is sorted. Right now it's in count mode. If you click on this little sort icon in the header, it's going to change it to alphanumeric. So now this is an alphabetic, and now it's easier to so if I'm looking for the Q9s, it's really hard because there are very few. Who knows where they're going to be in the list, right? Put it into alpha mode. Now you can quickly search on the type that you want alphabetically. Okay. All right. So now let me close the type list panel. That's going to bring everybody back up. Let me clean up my interface a little bit more. I'm going to turn off traces so we get that unloaded. While I'm here, let me talk one more thing about traces. Let me clean up the interface. Okay, so turn off those two. So there are a couple options in the traces. We just talked about the colors and how to change those colors. You've got the trace depth slider, okay, which will update any trace that has been pulled. And then you've got this all. This does exactly what it says. It's going to pull traces for every aircraft that's loaded. Okay. So this is where you can get kind of backed into a corner with SkyGlass. If you've got 24-hour traces and you've got hundreds of aircraft loaded and you try and pull in all and you don't have a very powerful computer, you may get stuck. Okay. So if all can be very cool, but just make sure that your trace depth is something manageable for your computer, and you'll get to know that over time. So let me put it at 30 minutes. I'm going to turn off the icons just so we can see the traces easily. And it gives you a little warning because I had enough users that got into this corner and went, I need to give them a warning. So it says, are you sure you want to really, bog down, tax SkyGlass with all this data? Say yes. Now, while this is running, and you can see we've got a please wait going, and it's going to start filling in. Traces, the trace history is every 5 seconds, going back, like I can go back a couple of years. So imagine one 24-hour trace has more data that it's pulling and rendering than all military aircraft positions at any one time. It's a lot of data. So 24-hour traces for a bunch of aircraft, it can really, it's the, what it's trying to render can get very heavy. Okay. And then once it's done, is it done? It looks like most of it are done. Let me, you can adjust the slider and it will pull all those traces and repaint them based on the new setting. So let's go to 30 minutes. Or I'm sorry, 1 hour. So again, this is one of these areas, if you start clicking around, changing things, it's not going to be able to finish what it was doing last in order to do the next thing. So be patient, wait for it to stop saying, please wait. And then you'll get what you want. Okay. When you're in auto refresh mode and the keep is off, like default, as that aircraft goes farther and longer, it will keep adding to the trace, meaning that old position will still maintain or will still be on the screen, and it'll keep getting longer and longer. If you if you enable the keep, that's going to maintain, it'll do its best to maintain that trace length to the said setting. So it'll stay 30 minutes or so. Most times, well, it all depends on what your purpose is, but I don't usually mess with the keep because I'm, turning things on, turning things off. You'll notice also when you're in all mode, the trace icon in the main button stack turns red to let you know that you're in a heavy load mode. All right, so I'm going to unload. And now let's talk briefly about the watch list. I'll pause for questions. All right, we'll keep moving forward. Okay, so let me turn on the watch list. Again, we've got a banner with a couple of stars on it that pulls up the watch list. When an aircraft is added to the watch list, it goes into a generic bin, an unassigned group. Okay, I'll say that. And you can see we've got a couple of aircraft that we've already put into the watch list from hitting the banner icon, whether it was in the type list panel or the HUD. Okay, so those have been added. Now, if you hover over an aircraft, like the C-17, for example, and I right click on it, you'll notice it immediately gets added to the watch list. So that's the most efficient way to add things to your watch list. If you see it in the field, right click, and you'll see immediately the icon background and border will change to represent the color scheme of the watch list entries. And you'll see it's been added to the unassigned group. So I'm going to just pop through a couple and add some more just so we've got some stuff to work with. Okay. So now that I've got 6 aircraft in this, in my watch list, let me talk about the watch list header a little bit. Watch list header will give you a count, how many aircraft are showing versus total in the list. Because I've just added from what's actually live in the field, we've got 6 of 6 because they're all flying. If you've downloaded Monkey's list from his website or gotten an exported list from another user, most likely old, aircraft, not all aircraft are going to be flying. So you'll see, it's showing 13 out of 180 or whatever the count is, right? Okay. Let me keep going. Okay, so in this main watch list header, watch list 6 of 6, you've got this first icon, which is going to reload the watch list. I'll show why that's important in a second. This is how to turn the auto refresh on for just the watch list. This next icon, location, you'll notice that the teardrop is sort of location centric in the SkyGlass world. If you turn this on, you'll notice the display here changes. it changes from, let me reload the watch list again. It changes from the standard view, which is aircraft label, last call sign, and type, to aircraft label, last known location, lookup, right? So it's not giving you the actual location, it gives you a vector to the nearest metropolitan area. So this guy, 5 miles in a direction of Moore, Oklahoma. This guy's 60 miles southeast of Brandon. Okay, so let me do this. I'm going to burn. So I'm going to clear the field. Since the watch list panel is open, it automatically loads watch list aircraft after a burn. So if your watch list is open, it's going to keep loading. It'll automatically load the aircraft. Okay, in a snapshot. If you want to turn the auto refresh on for just your watch list, so you're saying, I don't want to see any other aircraft, but just what's on my watch list. We've got the auto refresh icon here. Click on that. It's going to turn green. And now you've got a little clock indicator based on the auto refresh setting. Okay. So I'm going to turn off the auto refresh and finish up with the description header. So this one, the little aircraft icon, that will limit what is showing in the aircraft watch list listing to only those flying. So if you've imported a list or you've generated a list of hundreds and hundreds of aircraft, you can limit the list of what's displayed as only those that are up at the moment. Okay. As an example, like those two aircraft are not reporting now. So you'll see that the listing is gray and the aircraft that are active are white. Okay. Incidentally, let me switch it back into the regular display mode. Let me reload. If you click on these entries, it will zoom to that aircraft's location, like you did with the jumper. It does the same kind of thing. Okay. There are a bunch of additional features, but I'm not going to get into that now. This is how you import and export, etc. This is stuff for the deep dive. So, and this auxiliary little button stack panel in the header is governed by this button here. So I'm going to turn that off. All right. So let's talk about grouping and editing of the aircraft label. So let's say order 26. Along the list here, we've got a few icons. This is how you remove it from the watch list. If you click on that negative, there's sort of there's a trash can level before it actually goes away completely. It puts it into a deleted group. Okay, we'll leave that there for now. Now slash, well, let's do outlaw 12. This icon with a square, like a piece of paper and a pencil, click on that. Then we've got this extra editing window that pops up, edit the watch list item, outlaw 12 C30. When you're adding from the field, the label that gets inherited by default is the hex code. You can give this any name you want. So let's say this is the sneak attack. And now you'll notice that now I've given it a label and that's replaced the hex code. Okay. And you can do that for any aircraft. You can also, from this editing window, let's say this is a slasher. From this editing window, you can create and assign groups. So let's say we want to add a new group. Oops, let me do that again. I'm going to add a new group. That changes, gives you an input panel here. And we'll say these are my mill watch. Save, and you'll notice a couple things happen. We've got a new group entry, and that aircraft has been moved into that new group. Okay, I'm going to save that, so that'll close that window. Now that we have a new group defined, you can drag and drop from one group to another. So from here, I'm going to grab this sneak attack. You do that by grabbing the aircraft icon itself. Click, I'm going to drag that, and you'll see that now that's in that group. So this is a nice way of like, oh, I've moved it to deleted. I don't want to delete it. I'm just going to drag it back into that group that it was defined. When a group no longer has any entries, it goes away. So you can see that deleted group. When I pull that aircraft out, it automatically went away because there's no aircraft in that group. In addition, you can show traces of that aircraft in the watch list by clicking on the trace icon. You can paint the traces for every aircraft in that group by choosing the trace icon in the group header. As well, you can collapse and expand the group headers. Oops. And in the same way that you have the functionality in the type list, if you click on the aircraft header, it'll turn blue and isolate to just those aircraft. If you right click, it will hide those aircraft. And clicking again will just bring it back to normal view. In the watch list header, you also have a little chevron, which will toggle all of the groups to expand or collapse. Okay, I'm going to stop there. Any questions on the watch list?
Yeah, I want to know when you sleep. You don't, I'll bet.
I try. Yeah, I didn't get a lot of sleep the first year. The first few versions, man, they required the tech support line was blowing up every day, all day long.
How long
Now,
did it take to write it? How long did it take to write it?
I was in prototype development for about 5 years part-time. And then I launched a little bit over a year ago. And about 18 months before that, I went into full coding mode. So it's been about 2.5 years that it's been full-time. But I tell you, once I think it was, Ren, you help me remember this, was it version 1.4? I think it was after 1.5 and 1.6, all the tech support requests just went away. And now most of what I get is like, what's my username? I forgot my username, So it's gotten a lot better. There's still a lot more room to go. There's some automation that I want to create, switching modes. It'll clean up stuff when you zoom in. It'll automatically, rejigger the sizing of things to kind of keep everything in view. And honestly, it's the feedback from users that really guides the development. I try and be very responsive and I try and really hear people. It was so nice to not have a lot of tech support requests. But I'm so glad to have these live trainings because now I can actually get the feedback loop going. I lost my feedback loop.
Are you an aeronautical engineer?
No, but I am a pilot. Instrument rated private pilot, got about 500 hours, been flying for about 20 years, owned an aircraft for a long time. But no, not an engineer, just software engineer. Yeah. My dad actually was a captain in the Civil Air Patrol. And so I grew up in little puddle jumpers, going on vacations, camping with the Cessna, that kind of thing. So that's kind of what put it in my blood. Anyway, any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
My computer's 4 years old. I have an iMac 21-inch I think it's one of those 4G Retina systems, and I
Okay.
have 16 gigabytes of RAM, and obviously that is not optimal. I mean, I'm able to do things on this, but it's time. The system's 4 years old, and it's time to do something else. Would if I maxed out what they call the 24-inch iMac, like got the highest level build on that, would that be sufficient to do what I would want to do here with SkyGlass? Or would I be better poised to do what I would like to do if I got a Mac Studio?
I'll tell you, maybe this will answer your question. I run 24-inch iMac.
Okay,
That's what I develop on too. This has got
All right.
plenty of horsepower.
okay,
So I will tell you, SkyGlass requires at least, well, let me put it this way. SkyGlass will take about 2 gigs of RAM in normal operation, and that will climb if you do traces or more aircraft, et cetera, et cetera. So there is a RAM requirement, but honestly, the real efficiencies are in the graphics processor. So if someone has a Windows system and they're like, well, I want to add more RAM, adding more RAM is not going to do much for SkyGlass. If you were to upgrade the graphics card, then you'd see a huge difference. With Macs, they've got really strong graphics capabilities, and you can't really change the graphics card in an iMac anyway. But that's really the determination. The biggest gain is upgrading the graphics capabilities of the card, of the computer. Any modern computer and mobile device in the last couple of years is going to do okay. But I'll tell you from experience, this is why I picked the M1 Mac. This is a 2021. I think I got it last year. Plenty of bang for the buck, for sure. And it will totally run SkyGlass.
okay,
And even so, I can put SkyGlass into, overload mode because of the, if I know what settings to make, I can max it out. So it's not that you can't get into the, into a cul-de-sac and overload it. That's a real settings thing. But anyway, does that answer your question?
yes, it does. That's very helpful. Thank you.
You bet. Excited for your new machine.
Yeah, whenever I get it, yes.
Good. Any other questions? I'm just going to look over the list here and make sure I covered everything. Yeah. Okay, good. All right. So I'm going to wrap up. Go ahead and stop sharing. So just to recap what we've covered today, we talked about the onboarding basics, how to get your username set up and going, how to log into SkyGlass. We went through the entire interface. We talked about the HUD in the right-hand corner. We talked about how to turn it on and off the debugger window, the interface pretty much in detail. We talked deeply about the differences between military mode and standard mode. We talked about how to keep yourself safe when you're in standard mode by keeping that search radius low and the different classes of aircraft. We did a basic overview of the traces. We did a good coverage of the type list panel. We did a cursory look at the watch list panel. And if you remember, we also talked about if your SkyGlass starts to get wonky, how to go into preferences and do a full reset and restore it back to the defaults. So we covered a lot of ground today. Really appreciate all the good questions. Really appreciate all your attention. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And what else was I going to say? Unless there's any other questions, we'll wrap it up.
As said earlier, remarkable coding. It's phenomenal.
Thank you. I really appreciate that feedback, Pat. Thank you. Awesome. Great stuff. So if you ever find yourself saying, I wish SkyGlass would do that, do this or that, please reach out to me, because I'll tell you, and Ren will attest, so many of the new features are because of that. Feedback of some user, something that I had thought of. I mean, it's been a remarkable journey to create something, and I do my best to put my, wrap my head around what I think y'all are going to do with it. And then you just take it farther. Like I literally, when I first did Watchlist, I thought, oh, 50, 60 aircraft, how many aircraft do people want to watch? Oh man. And then it was in the thousands, and then it's still growing. I've seen 10,000 aircraft watch lists. And when we do the deep dive on the database, you'll see how easy it is to really get those numbers up. And so again, your feedback really drives the innovation and what features are coming and how to make it better and all that kind of stuff. So please feel free to reach out to me. If you have any need of tech support, like I said, you can use the need help button on the website or the support forum. And if I'm not available, head over to the Discord server and you can get great support from the awesome Discord jockeys there. Thank you again to Ren for being the real ace in that category. Also, just want to mention, you can see I've got all my branded kit. Although Red's got his SkyGlass cup too. You can get this in the store. I price these with pretty low margins for me, but every little bit helps if you want to, spread the love and get some cool branded stuff. There's some really fabulous oversized mouse pads now. They're like 18 by 36. They cover your whole desk. It's like a very cool desk mat of a mouse material. I'm loving those. Super fun. And also, if you want to support the further development of SkyGlass, please consider becoming a Patreon member. Patreon members have a variety of advantages, but you always have a place in these classes. So regardless of how many people are registered, I always save out room for any of the patrons, and you can jump in at any time. So you get kind of priority seating to these live sessions. And that extra little bit really does make a huge difference in my development. Keeps me going because, like I said, I'm a one-man band, one army of one. I wear all the hats, and I love it. This is the most fun I've ever had doing a project. But that helps me, stay focused and lets me do this all by myself. So with that, did you have a question, Rick?
Yeah, unrelated item of interest. Have you been watching the Ukraine Anatov 124?
That's one of those huge ones, right? The Antonovs?
Yep, that's they got two or three of them in Ukraine. I happen to live within a mile or two of the final approach fix to an international airport here. And I heard an unusual noise one night, and then I turned the system on real quick. Turns out it was the 124 going in.
Yeah, it does. It makes some amazingly long routes. I mean, it's such a big plane. It's got crazy fuel capacity. And I do see it moving around a lot. It's sad that the big one is now out of commission. Obviously, we all know about what happened to that.
Yep.
That one was on my watch list for a while too. I'm pretty sure the Antonov is in Monkey's list as well. His watch list that you can get from from his website. But
I'm sure.
It makes the routes. It's all over the planet all the time. Yeah.
I'm seen him in here twice. So, hey, thanks for your work.
You're very welcome. Okay, unless there's any other questions, we can end it there. Thank you so much for your time. All right. Cheers. Bye for now.